What makes a good villain? There are a number of things, and villains are where a lot of writers seem to fall flat. I would say it's mainly because a lot of people, when they're writing a story, they have trouble putting themselves in the place of their antagonist. We don't want to, right? Because they're bad guys, and we don't want to be the bad guy. But keeping that in mind, we can actually craft way more credible bad guys. Because the fact is, they don't want to be the bad guy either, most of the time. The best villains think that they're the hero. There's a saying, if you know who said it first, go ahead and let me know in the comments, because I don't know. But it's been attributed to a bunch of different people. But I've heard it said more than a few times. Everybody is the hero of their own story, and that is true for villains. It should be true for your antagonist. Unless they are something mindless, like a zombie, we could consider that more like a force of nature. But if they are, let's say, an evil doctor trying to take over the world, why would they want to do that? They may be greedy for power, but at its root, it's way more compelling if they think they can do a better job of running the world. Because that's how evil exists in our world today. I'm not going to get into political discussion because I've skirted along the edge of that before, and that's not what we're really here to do. But it does, is one of the few things that I would say does apply to both sides. Whether you think the left is evil or the right is evil, and let's be frank, most people think one of those sides is evil. If you know me, you know which side I believe is. Whichever side you believe is evil, it's absurd to think that their entire motivation is the destruction of the social order. That's not really what's going on. They have a shitty way of going about it from your perspective, but in the end, what they're trying to do is make things better, right? And that's what your villain is. Your villain, their main motivation is to make the world a better place, even if they have a bad way of going about it. So what else can we say about your villain? How do you make them compelling? The example I want to use is from Paradise Lost, from Milton. It's a very big poem. I would be surprised if you haven't heard of it, but I know there are some people that haven't. I have a literature background, so sometimes that skews my knowledge of what other people are aware of. No worries if you haven't read it. It's a really good poem. It is really long, and in some parts it is really dry, but give it a shot if you want. One of the most important things about that, it's about the fall of man, right? From a religious perspective, the fall of man. It celebrates what a lot of people call the glorious fall, right? That the fall of man was a good thing. From a Christian perspective, the fall of man is a good thing because it allows Christ to come to earth, die for our sins, we gain forgiveness, right? This was a pretty controversial idea when Milton was writing about it, but one of the bigger controversies is when you read Paradise Lost, he's very effective at making you sympathize with the devil. And the devil, of course, the bad guy, is not supposed to be a sympathetic character from a Christian perspective. When Milton writes, the devil has charisma. He makes some very good points about equality and the place of the angels in God's creation. When you're reading the passages that come from the devil's perspective, there will be a few times where you may even start rooting for him. That makes him an effective villain, because then when he takes his turn and he starts doing his evil deeds, you find yourself questioning what you believe, right? That's the way you make an effective villain. Your villain should have some kind of charisma, because how are they going to accomplish anything if nobody likes them, right? Your villain should have at least enough intelligence to accomplish some of these goals, right? A bumbling fool, if it's, let's say, Cobra Commander. I'm going to use Cobra Commander a lot as an example of like a one-dimensional villain. He's a bad guy. He wants to rule the world. Why? So that he can be in charge of the world. What is his primary MO? Shaking his fist and shouting Cobra, right? He accomplishes very few of his goals, and he's a goddamn fool. At least in the more common animated medium where most people are familiar with him. So don't do that. Don't make a bumbling fool as your villain. He needs to be at least competent enough to accomplish partway what he's trying to do. He needs to be charismatic enough that people will allow him to accomplish those goals. And he needs to believe that he's doing the right thing. I don't want to go too much into a Hitler comparison because we know how that goes on the internet. But that could be a good model for a more megalomaniacal villain if you're trying to write one. Because what did he have? We, in the future, we know that he's a horrible piece of shit. But at the time, charismatic, good public speaker, believed he was saving Germany, or at least had the charisma to convince other people that was what he was trying to do, right? If we write our villains like that, they become much more believable and much more compelling. If you have something that makes your readers start to sympathize or agree with your villain, then it becomes a lot more impactful when your hero has to stop him. And it helps you as a writer because now you have to explain why the hero needs to stop them. Another thing I think was very effective with this, even though it was very short and the writing on it was very simple, it was very effective. Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. What was Dr. Horrible's motivation? Eventually he wanted to get the girl, right? That's a motivation a lot of people can relate to. But if you listen to his lyrics, a lot of what he's saying is there are big problems in the world and nobody's doing anything about the problems. People are treating the symptoms of the problems. He will solve the problems, but he has to be in a position of power to do so. A compelling villain wants to do the right thing, but they're willing to use bad means to get to that end, right? That's where our hero comes in. The ends don't justify the means to our hero. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing that we see a lot in the best villains, right? Think of the Joker and Batman, right? Now the Joker and Batman, it seems kind of counter to what I've already been saying, right? The Joker, what is his main motivation? Seems to be chaos, right? Not necessarily to make things better, but he's an agent of chaos. Well, that's where this next part comes in. Because another thing that makes a very good, compelling villain is having them be a reflection of the hero, right? And what is the reflection of Batman? Batman is order and justice. So being an agent of chaos, disrupting that justice, that's a great thing for his villain. That's why, even though it's not part of the comic canon, it shows up a lot in fan material. It even showed up in 1989 in Tim Burton's Batman as having the Joker and Batman, their reflections of each other are furthered by the fact that the Joker created Batman, Batman created the Joker. Even from a canon perspective, this is somewhat true. The Joker may not have personally killed the Waynes, but he's representative of the criminal environment that allowed them to be murdered, thus creating Batman. Batman being a symbol of order and justice is the one who creates the Joker in foiling his scheme, tossing him into the chemicals, whether accidentally or on purpose. So having your villain be a reflection of your hero is a great way to get people on the villain side. And people on the villain side, as I said before, is a really good way to make your villain more compelling. And then back to him being a bumbling fool. I'm not talking about him just being dumb. and not being able to accomplish much, his competence needs to be at a level that's a challenge for your hero, right? If you write an entire story, let's say you do 15,000 words about your villain and his scheme, and then in the last paragraph, the hero comes in, punches him in the jaw, sends him to jail. That's a letdown, right? He doesn't need to win every battle with the hero, but he's really worthless as a villain, as a foil to your hero, if he can't stand up to him. So if he is not as strong, then he needs to be smarter. If he's not as smart, then he needs to be stronger. Even if they don't have matching characteristics, powers, abilities, they need to be at certain levels that they even out, right? So make sure you're doing that with your villains. And then beyond all of those things, this one's a little harder for some people to do, because if you do it wrong, it looks awful, right? I'm guilty of this a lot. Make your villain be kind. Not kind as in like, you know, he's just the good guy who occasionally kills people. I mean kind like, think of Lex Luthor. What does Lex Luthor do besides trying to kill Superman? He funds inner city schools, builds playgrounds, gives to cancer research, right? Lex Luthor, even in the Batman vs. Superman, the Dawn of Justice movie, a lot of people criticize Lex Luthor, but one thing they did, they introduced his character at a literacy event. He's promoting literacy with books. He's not a very good public speaker. He's an annoying twat in almost all of those scenes. But he's out there doing good, showing kindness, looking care of his fellow man, right? And it makes it so that he's a person. He's a genuine person. And so if he says he's trying to do the best for mankind, it's way more believable if he's doing that in more than just trying to take over the world, right? Because a flat villain can ruin an otherwise perfect story, right? And the reason you want to focus on your villain, not entirely, but at least some, before you've released your work, you want to focus on your villain, because no matter how much time you spend on everyone else, and it almost always is a lot of time, right? You'll craft a backstory for your hero, you'll have their family relationships, where they fit into the world, who they know, who they love. You can have 10 pages of character information for one hero. And then your villain, he's a bad guy. He kills people. He wants to take over the world. Even something as simple as like he robs liquor stores. Well, why does he rob liquor stores? Does he rob liquor stores because he's greedy and wants the money? Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Robbing liquor stores is not a very effective way to get a lot of money. If you're greedy, you need to be going after bigger fish. If you're robbing a liquor store, you have some kind of immediate need. What is that immediate need? Does he have a family that he needs to support and he has no other means? If he's robbing a liquor store, he's desperate. What makes him desperate? What makes him so desperate that he's willing to make a risk like that? Because that's where you're going to find the best stories, is when everyone is fully fleshed out and has good motivations. That's been my video for today. I want to thank you all for watching. If you like what you've seen or you want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon. It will tell you when I post new videos. Right now, I'm set up for every Monday and every Wednesday. And then I'll be releasing writing every Friday on the Patreon site. And that is, of course, public and able to access without any subscriptions or anything. But if you do feel like subscribing through Patreon, there will be exclusives there as well. So go ahead and check that out. The Patreon site is patreon.com/touchbone. I want to thank you all for watching my video. If you have any thoughts, anything you'd like to add, or anything you'd like to refute, go ahead and put it down in the comments. I'd love to read it. Thank you. Have a great one. Bye.